Hello, and welcome to our third podcast for a series of podcasts on breakthrough in banking with GenAI. As banks are evolving, different use cases of GenAI, there are different touch points that GenAI has created in the BFSI community, be it fraud detection, customer services, to creating new products. Uh, More than half of the CIOs feel that the impact of GenAI is going to be more than the impact of cloud. More than 80% of CIOs in India have already implemented GenAI at some capacities from POC level. And out of that, 36% of the CIOs have already shifted from POC level to a production ready setup. With obvious investments in GenAI, there are challenges and there are heats that a lot of CIOs are facing. They are under tremendous pressure when it comes to creating and advocating tangible outcomes of GenAI. Two-thirds of the executives feel that they don't have necessary frameworks, KPIs, matrices when it comes to measurement of GenAI outcomes. In today's podcast, we are going to answer some of the important questions related to data, acting as an enabler in BFSI, specifically in the GenAI adoption, as well as we are going to understand what are the KPIs, frameworks available in the market, and best practices that different CIOs can learn and start implementing in their own setups. For today's podcast, we have our panelists with us. First, we have Mr. Tejasvi. Tejasvi is the SVP, Head of Enterprise Data Management at HDFC Bank. A data leader and strategist with more than 17 years of experience in successfully transforming enterprises. In his current role in HDFC, he is spearheading the data quality and process quality initiatives for customers and increasing customer trust and financial decision-making efficiencies. Then we have Mr. Vijay Jain. Vijay is the client partner at Persistent with decades of experience in identifying, nurturing, and developing new markets, building diverse teams, finding and implementing right tools and technologies to enable successful digital transformation. Then we have Mr. Kunal. Kunal is the seasoned tech enthusiast with almost 2 decades of experience in cloud computing, data analytics. As the head of data analytics and AI sales in South Asia for Google Cloud, Kunal is dedicated to empowering enterprises to harness the power of AI and data to achieve unprecedented growth. Welcome all.
Thank you.
The first question, Tejasvi, I have for you. Some of the pressing issues that BFSI organizations are facing are related to data governance, data management. Starting from data strategy to risk management to data democratization. Data acts as a key building block when it comes to developing right tools, right products, understanding customer sentiments. From your experience, how do you think, and do you think Indian banks are actually facing issues pertaining to data management and governance, specifically in the core banking ecosystem?
Well, that's a great question, Ayush. Having been into data management and governance for at least 15 years, and having worked with multiple banks across US, UK, Australia, Vietnam, and India, obviously, I can specifically call out that, the Asian banks, in fact, are getting to understand that there's a need to actively manage data and govern it, not only just for their consumption use cases, like, having to drive analytics out of it, or having to put some strategic insights that can help the board take certain decisions. It's also around having to actively manage data in the core landscape, which I think you were asking about.
Yep.
When I say that, we're talking about a source landscape, we're talking about probably 400 to 700 applications in a bank, which in fact help the customers transact by having to curate information as well. And there's lots of moving parts of data, which is called data in motion, apart from data at rest, which we popularly know in the industry. Now, when we talk about data management and governance, it can be applied to data in motion as well, apart from data at rest. So the source landscape governance will be more focused around data in motion and having to actively manage and govern it. And the consumption landscape requires having to govern it governed data, specifically for data at risk. Now, when you talk about uh, Indian banks were having a fiduciary duty, having to manage data without having to know that there is a need to manage it. So it was a practice which got imbibed right by the CIOs at the time when systems had started, um, you know, working towards generating outcomes. Be it the core banking systems. If we take an example of FlexCube or a Finacle, in some way there was certain structure around having to manage data in a better way. And Indian firms, in fact, like Infosys or Wipros or TCS, they had put in best practices to be able to manage data by model and having to imbibe certain artifacts like dictionaries, which in fact come with the product themselves, which are getting to help the banks to better manage data. So if I look at the maturity scale of Indian banks on data management and governance, I would say that, probably we are not quite mature as the US banks or the UK banks. And there is still lots of investment that needs to go into, data management and data offices. Now, what is the first step to having to formalize data management is to identify a chief data officer who can be a chief sponsor.
Yep.
And also understanding if there needs to be a specific strategic roadmap and operational roadmap to be able to cascade some of the goals and objectives of the bank, which can be related to data.
Right.
Now, data as an enterprise asset, is popularly called out in multiple literature as well. Now, how easy is it for us to manifest this particular aspect is what a data officer is supposed to do. So I would say that, Indian banks are in the process of having to hire data officers today, while having to put data strategies in place, but having to take it into operations is probably a longer game.
Perfect. And if I may ask, just a follow up on that, and you touched upon a very interesting point. These data officers, in an overall org structure, do they roll up to the CIO vertical or some other vertical within the organization?
Well, what I have seen is that, with a bank with a maturity scale of, let's say, less than 2, which in fact has its data capabilities as just defined, or at least in a preliminary initial phase, in fact has the data office or the data capability management reporting into the CIO.
All right.
And when we talk about mature banks, where in fact data has already been established as an enterprise asset,
Yep.
we can see that the data capabilities are more inclined towards the business units, because business ownership is what drives data ownership as well. And the benefits of having to manage data in fact goes into the balance sheets of the business owners. And that's where quite mature banks in fact have chief data officers reporting into the COOs, or they themselves are independent in terms of reporting structures, and they can be a part of the board as well.
Perfect. Another question, Tejasvi. When it comes to BFSI organizations, we have established already that Gen AI is creating a significant impact and getting a lot of investments. Now, there's a journey that includes getting data, large amount of data from outside in, inside out purviews, and that data acts as the core engine when it comes to creating new tools, products, etc. What strategic approach do you think banks should adopt, and an ideal framework in your mind, time frame, sorry, that justifies the overall outcome of these Gen AI initiatives?
Well, that's a tricky question. If you're asking about the timeline that it is going to take to be able to create an ROI of a Gen AI investment, well, I would start off by having to say that, having the right infrastructure in place for a bank to be able to start having to put a POC and a use case that in fact can solve for either regulatory challenges or, let's say, a customer experience challenge, is something that needs to be thought through. And having to think through which use case can fit a GenAI or an LLM kind of a capability when plugged in with the right data is going to take anywhere between 8 weeks to probably 6 months.
Right.
And primarily because when we talk about large organizations like, HDFC, we are in fact looking at a vast landscape with many systems in place and many applications, which in fact will require us to do an extensive discovery around, what are the kind of customers we're targeting and where are these customers residing? What are the databases associated with these customers' data?
Yep.
And this discovery is in fact going to take significant time. And that's where data management and governance focuses on democratizing all of this information, which is something that we are doing today. So when we democratize data, as well as, the metadata, it becomes much easier for us to cut short the time it takes for a GenAI use case to be going from a POC stage into a production stage.
But the precursor is data democratization
In fact,
and setting up the overall governance and management setup.
absolutely.
Perfect. As a data leader, tell us some of the best practices, frameworks that you have adopted in HDFC while dealing with the data and making meaningful impact within your organization. Also, please help us understand what is your vision when it comes to GenAI, keeping data at the forefront for that.
So I'm assuming, Ayush, there are two questions to it. Some of the good initiatives that I'm working currently are around how to create a trust score for a customer.
Okay.
So every customer who walks into a branch or digitally transacts with the bank will have to have a trust score associated with the customer, which in fact means that, whatever is the key or the critical data which has been consented from the customer has to be qualitative and accurate, even as per, privacy laws like GDPR or the upcoming DPDP. And it's in fact paramount that, data is accurate and it is resembling real world, data, which in fact can be data on the Aadhaar card or a PAN card or an officially valid document, which are being collected as KYC documents by the bank. Now, a trust score, in fact, is a combination of, 6 dimensions of data,
Okay.
which are completeness, accuracy, consistency, which can mean that, data needs to be structurally consistent as well as semantically consistent. It needs to be of sufficient integrity. It has to have accuracy. And further to that, it needs to be valid, which is quite an important characteristic. And it needs to be timely and most current. Now, all these characteristics and dimensions of data coming together creates a trust score, which in fact is applied to each of the customer coming to the bank.
Right.
And this is one of the paramount project or a program which I have embarked on. And this is giving us a bedrock to be able to serve the customers better, because we know where in fact good data needs to be replicated. And wherever bad data exists, we ask the customers to give us good data back. And this is in fact, has taken us probably around 2 years to be able to come to this stage.
Thank you, Tejasvi, for that. Next question, Vijay, I have for you. Even before the arrival of GenAI, Persistent's focus has always been a very strong focus on data engineering, data management. How do you see Persistent's business solution strategy fitting well for BFSI organizations in generating tangible outcomes?
So, see, Persistent is name itself come from the data itself, right? And our founder, Mr. Anand Deshpande, he started his company way back in 35 years, right? So we are consistently in the database business itself, right? Our focus is on the data driven and more focus on the banking sector itself, right? We are working from the decades with the banking sectors on the data itself, data product engineering, data quality, data injections, right? How we can get the tangible outcome from the data itself, right? So that is our main focus of business, I would say that, right? Persistent. And in terms of the banking sector, right, we are working with closely with the bank for the data lake solution, right, or a fraud detection solution, right. On top of that, the GenAI solution is on top of that, right.
Okay.
We have various products that we develop on the data itself. For example, iAura, which sits on your data itself, right. They complete the data migration, data injection, data quality, data improvement, how we can get information from the data itself, which is already there in the system. How can monetize those data? It's itself our core area of function is there.
Perfect. Thank you, Vijay, for that. Kunal, the question for you. Now, we understand BFSI organizations come with their own challenges pertaining to length and breadth of data. What Tejasvi was also hinting towards, having a precursor data management, data governance setup before you actually delve deeper into the implementations of GenAI of the world. And that importance and challenge actually is broadening day by day as we are progressing towards newer technologies. For such an ecosystem, which actually entails a lot of risk as well, how does Google Cloud, which has a strong prowess in data-led insights, is actually helping setting up data governance and management practices and frameworks in BFSI organizations?
Interesting question, Ayush. Whenever I talk to bankers, I tend to say that the swim in data is because a bank has got so much data, like customer data, market data, regulatory reporting related data, right? There is so much information that I think anyone can get overwhelmed with it. Google's got a particular prowess in being able to process very large volumes of data. Some of the most seminal technologies around big data were sort of created within Google.
Yep.
And Google's got multiple products which are more than $1 billion in terms of revenue annually, which was completely data led. Good example being Maps is just lat long data, just visualized on a nice fancy app. So Google's got technology which is developed for itself, which sort of kind of brings forth to the customers to kind of use. But let me give you specific examples around banking that we can help with. So we bring data governance that's actually usable, right? So we don't just do a normal data catalog, which a lot of vendors do, very cloud space. I and Tejas, you were having a conversation just before that. It's like very cloud space. But the catalogs that we have use machine learning and AI to be able to kind of on their own classify, tag and then map data relationships within the various data silos that an enterprise such as a bank may have, right? And this is very important. Let me give you an example. Imagine being able to tag all the PII data within an enterprise, right? So that you can then take care of in a compliant regulatory framework sort of a way. It's a very manual, dirty task, but data catalogs are able to do this using machine learning automatically. And this is important from a compliance standpoint with, acts like GDPR and the, DPDP in India coming through.
Yep.
These tools can help in that. The other place that we really help banks is around just migrating to the cloud, right? Migration services are, extremely thought through. For a bank, it's very important that the data is consistent, it doesn't break, there's no breach while they're doing this migration, and it's validated when it reaches the other end. Our migration services are thought through, there is an assessment, there's planning, and we tend to use a lot of automated tools to make sure that there is very little manual errors that creep into this process. And then lastly, Vijay mentioned, fraud. So AI and fraud are something that Google does really well. It's not the traditional fraud detection systems that most talk about. This is real-time fraud detection where we use AI to kind of bring in or spot trends or patterns which are probably not even visible to humans, right? And in real time, so that you can take proactive action rather than reactive action, later, once the fraud's probably actually happened because your fraud system kicked in much later. So those are some areas where you can really help banks.
Perfect. Kunal, a follow-up on that. And a very hot thing, which is actually a next step, specifically when it comes to AI, is ethical AI. We are concerned about the accuracy, ethical capabilities, and overall adoption capabilities of AI. How does Google Cloud ensure these facets are being met while ensuring the overall solution is scalable in nature?
So the way we look at AI is Google Cloud and Google in general makes sure that we have explainability built into our AI models. And for a sector like banking, that's extremely important. Imagine, using AI models for loan processing or credit card scoring or even trust scores, right? You need to be able to explain to your end customer how did the model arrive at the particular decision that it did. So explainability is sort of built into the core of all our AI products, and we will be able to kind of explain the model outcome as well as have tools to be able to monitor this, right? The other is bias, right? A model needs to be unbiased,
Yes.
right? And the way we do this is we make sure that our models are trained on very diverse set of data. We try and test rigorously for any unintentional biases that may creep into a model, and we take corrective action as soon as we detect something around that. And lastly, we make sure that we roll this out in a manner where there are no adverse consequences if there is some drift in the model towards some bias, right? These models need to be trusted, right? And if there is bias and we are kind of adding to the societal biases, these models will not be trusted and not be put into production. And then the last piece you mentioned about scale, right? The models are designed in such a way that a banking customer can come in and very easily fine-tune this model, augment it with their own data set. What this allows them to do is keep the model relevant for any new data that comes into their ecosystem. And then lastly, all of these models run on the world's most scalable AI infrastructure on the Google Cloud. So that's how we take care of that.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Kunal. Vijay, question for you. When it comes to impact measurement of GenAI, AI initiatives, what best practices, frameworks, or tools do you recommend to CIOs to ensure there's a balance of qualitative and quantitative matrices for them while they are measuring the outcome?
See, banking sector is more rely on the data, right? More the data, the customer data, right? So various forms of data is there from the banking sector. Various customers like other customers like financial customer are there, wealth management customer are there, or banking customers are there, right? So lots of source of data is there. So data quality is more important. Once data is there, because data is in the volume, right? So measuring on the volume and giving a customer experience is more important, right? So banks should focus more on the customer experience. Secondly, lots of regulatory compliance are there, right? They have to, like RBI or other compliance, SEBI is there, right? So they keep on asking our data, right? So that data, they have to give accurate data. So that compliance as well as the customer experience as well as the internal system, right? Where the various reporting structures are required to give the quality and quantitative data is there, right? So they have to focus on that area, and top of that, so how they do this? They help up with the technologies, right? Say example, quality of the data they're taking from the various source of data they are taking. So using a right set of technology tools is more important, right? Same way, right kind of a decision making system is also important to process the technology in a right manner, in a right time frame, so that we get the quality output in a time bounded manner, right? And the third thing is keep more on the say example, we have our own product is there. So by doing a number of POCs with the various technologies, right, to get the more gist about it, which technology is best suited for me, right, by analyzing on the top of that. That is more important.
Perfect. So kind of creating a consultative layer on top of that. Perfect. All right. Thank you all for your time. We covered quite some interesting topics, starting from data address to data emotions, to finalizing the fact that setting up data governance and management as a precursor before you start and embark on Gen AI or AI journeys, which actually cut short your overall time frame for impact realization. Thank you all for taking out time. It was great experience and a great discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, it's a pleasure.